In this episode, we'll be diving into the State of GovTech 2025, a hallmark event hosted by CivStart's, the premier hub for government technology innovation. I had the privilege of attending and interviewing a diverse group of participants, and I'm excited to share some of their insights with you today. First up is my conversation with Amanda Renteria, CEO of Code for America. So, one of the things we notice, and I think we just read the newspaper to see this, is that cities, local governments are dealing with legacy systems. And I was wondering if you could share with us how can city leaders rethink service delivery that can help them stretch those limited resources, but not, and this is the critical part I think you guys are focusing on, not sacrifice service delivery itself.
Yeah, and one of the things I'm most excited to see happening more and more is really the way governments are now implementing solutions. It really is a pilot at a time, or a county at a time, or taking your smallest county, working it through, figuring out, are those the right questions? Is that the right front-facing tool to reach various counties? But you start small. And that used to not be the case in technology. It used to say, here's your big system, right? And all of a sudden, government, go ahead and try and do it. Now, more and more, the process is changing where it's more of a partnership of implementation. And that's really key, because you actually do end up surfacing legacy system issues that you wouldn't have known unless you piloted. And so it has a lot of different reasons to do it small, not only for the legacy systems, but also you can bring in surveys for the customers and say, did that work? Did that not work? And then you adjust accordingly. Yeah.
So I was thinking, because that gets to my next question around public expectations. And we've gotten so used to it, when we think of government, we think of private sector experiences. And I'm wondering, how can city leaders stay ahead of these shifts in expectations? And what role does partnering with your organization help? How do you help them do that?
Yeah. So this is one of those that I think really shifted in COVID, where people started to just expect government could do things digitally in a way that I think we always were like, okay, you can get your driver's license online. Great. Wow. I didn't know I didn't have to go into an office. COVID really changed expectation with the idea that they think that government should be able to go online. And so as I think about, how we move forward, that aspect of it, of making sure to meet people where they are, particularly in moments of crisis. So where government has an opportunity to really build trust is in that moment of crisis where all of a sudden government is the only one there. And so to the extent we can help governments, whether it's in a fire, figuring out housing, figuring out resources, that is a moment where I think cities and states should really focus on, especially as climate change changes more, people are experiencing a lot more floods, et cetera. How do we get our government services super resilient in the most moment of need for their residents? And so more and more, we're finding ourselves getting pulled into LA County fires or Houston floods because governments can't quite move fast enough. The private sector, there really isn't profit motive, or shouldn't be in those moments. So if they can do that right, in a moment of crisis, then you start to see, just like in COVID, systems opened up in the normal regular day of business. Just like in LA County right now, they're having questions about maybe our permitting should be different. So there's a real moment there. I know it's never a good time to learn in a crisis, but it does open up things in a different way in government when those moments happen.
So earlier you mentioned that Code for America had their annual conference, I believe, right? And I know it's essential for your mission to suggest that cities or state localities collaborate and sort of share peer experiences. I'm wondering if you can give us some examples of where cities have done this effectively. And really my question is around how important is collaboration to the success of any of these efforts?
It's interesting because we would work in different cities singularly. And one of our big drivers was, how do we get best practices out there? And as we started to share collectively with other people, we found ourselves saying, well, so-and-so state did this. A good example, during COVID, when people were trying to get kids resources, find where they lived, how they lived, we were starting to notice that various states were having the same problem with deduplicating data, trying to figure out how to link your school data with your state data. And what we realized is actually we weren't the experts. It was state of Colorado, or it was, the state of Rhode Island. And we started to recognize that if we were just the convener, and sure, we could pull out some of these best practices and sort of help facilitate that conversation, but the most important voice was those folks who were actually doing the solutions to sort of share across the way. And so our convening was early on in the early days was how do you bring technologists together? And it has now become how do you bring technologists and government people together to talk about what's sort of being impacted in the environment. And that often leads you to a very solution-oriented discussion. So I think when people come out of our summit, they often say, wow, that was inspiring. I feel like we can do a lot in government and in GovTech. But it changes. In the early days, it was just getting together. Yeah. Now, as people left this summit, what we got a lot more of is, thanks for educating us about how other people are doing AI. We're still struggling with it, but it gave us something to work with, right? Thanks for telling the stories of progress that we want to keep the momentum going. So it's interesting for me is in the last 5 years when we've done our summits, there's a reason for inspiration, but it's never been the same. It's always been different.
Interesting. Why is that, do you think?
I think the world is changing.
It's just an adapting to it.
Yeah, at least in the last 5 years, the world is changing quite a bit. And we think about government as being stagnant, and it's not. It has to deal with all these changes coming at it in real time. And I think we are seeing a more engaged public with government than ever before. And people used to say like, oh, Amanda, you love government. You're, that boring job, right? And everyone now is like, wait a second, can you tell me about this policy? Yeah. They're starting to realize it affects my life. And can you tell me about this policy? I want to know like what it really means. I love those discussions. And I think what you're seeing is governments that's coming at government now, where they need to be prepared for it a lot more in a quicker time frame.
Yeah. So you've had a success it's been a leader in civ tech for over a decade. At least over a decade, your organization.
Code for America, yes.
And I'm thinking, what's your, if you don't mind, sort of give us an idea of what your vision is for the next, I wouldn't say decade, but like
I don't know, anyone can think 10 years down the road.
But what's the vision? What do you see it shifting a lit's bit, or where's it going?
Oh, we are at the very beginning of a major transformation. So the way I think about it is, and I said this at our Code for America Summit, is a quote by Gramsci, which is the old world is dying and the new world is struggling to be born. And we're right at the middle of it. And that's why I think it's a transformation, because we are seeing not just on the sidelines, but we're seeing internal infrastructure systems changing. And that really has a lot to do with technology at the center of it. So we're seeing a major modernization that's happening at the federal level that always rolls down. It will fundamentally change, and it is fundamentally changing the way federal agencies are going to be working. That's going to have implications on states and cities in the same way. And I think some of the things you will see is government will just look differently. I mean, we've already noticed it's more online than buildings. Yeah. But now you're going to start to see sort of agencies moving together in a different way because technology allows that sharing of data. So one way to think about it is I think about my 15-year-old who just accesses things in a totally different way, right? It's not the traditional media. It's the information he gets is from his peers, from his community. And one of the things we're seeing is sometimes online and new systems really do bring a community together. And so I do think on everyone's fear about like, oh my God, everything's going to be technology first or mobile first. We're also seeing it does allow you to say what's happening in my world and how do I get what my community is doing and how can I engage in it? And technology allows more of that two-way street than going into a building and figuring out how to go to that city council meeting. I mean, even the idea that city council meetings now you can zoom into. So that two-way street will fundamentally change government. And at the center of all of this is really technology, the way the systems work and how they will be different going forward. And a new generation is coming into government while we're going to see a lot more retirements happening. We've always known that was going to happen, but I think you're going to see it speed up as new technology comes in.
My guest this segment is Niles Friedman, board chair at CivStart. Given your role as the board chair of CivStart, can you give us a little bit of insight into its mission and purpose?
Yeah, I mean, this is, so I got connected with CivStart about 5 years ago through some folks in California that were part of the board. And I remember just being immediately connected in with their mission. They're a nonprofit. They're focused on how do you build innovation capacity within the state and local levels of government. how do you do that in a sustainable way? They had this connection with startups. It was just this blending of a lot of things that I had interest in and had experience in. And I remember just meeting the core team and just thinking, wow, I mean, these guys are doing some amazing work. It's a really lean team. And the fact that they've had that level of impact in a short period of time was really amazing. So for me, it felt like a very natural connection. So I joined in through the mentorship network and got a better sense of like what they were trying to do at the end of the day. And so their accelerator program is their anchor program to really build that capacity of startups so that they are better equipped to work at the state and local levels of government. And as board chair, the role is to obviously manage the board, but it's to really connect with the three co-founders on a regular basis about programmatically, what are you doing? How can the board support? How can I provide support? And that's really at the core of a lot of the day-to-day with the board, and through extension, the co-founders. So, I think their work with the accelerator program, their ability to really look at what I call challenge-based procurement, but it's an approach to really redefine the way procurement is delivered within the state and local levels of government that can also be federal. But it's focusing on a business challenge and then coalescing around what is needed to support an agency department around that business need that they have. So again, something that CivStart's done a lot of work over the last 5 years to really hone in on, I think build more awareness and capacity around, is also another big area of focus for them.
So just, I like the distinction you made or the compliment you made about CivTech and GovTech. I'd like to get your perspective for our audience. How would you describe or define this ecosystem of GovTech, CivTech? What exactly is it?
It's a good question. I love this question. So I was just in Madrid at a GovTech conference and was on a panel discussing the differences between the United States and EU, European GovTech. And the conversation came up, the question came up around what is civic tech? How is that different from GovTech? I think in the United States, there are sort of two different camps, right? I think it's starting to blend. Actually, you saw the CEO for Code for America at the State of GovTech today. Code for America is very much seen, I believe, in the civic tech world. GovTech, while CivStart does operate in the GovTech space, they bring in elements of the civic tech community, given their focus on residents and communities. And again, what can startups do to better support the delivery of services? So you see them being kind of in the middle ground, but also I think exemplifying, the strengths of both, right? The sort of pure GovTech world or the civic tech world in the US. What's fascinating is you go to many parts outside of the US, in Europe, in the EU, it's just one. It's just GovTech, right? So they talk about startup capacity. They talk about putting the resident first with respect to service delivery. They talk about how do you sell products. I mean, there's a pureness to it, but it's all underneath one umbrella. And then people have different sort of channels or lanes that they work in. So this conference that I went to in Madrid was really great because it starts to blend and talk about, well, what are we trying to do at the end of the day? So if you're a startup, if you're a government official, if you're a tech company, whatever your role is, like what are we ultimately trying to achieve? And it's to deliver better services for people, for citizens, for residents, for customers, however you define it. And I think in the States, you can hear people talk about it in these two camps, but I think we can do a better job of blending it. Yeah. So if you're a tech company and you have a product that you need to sell into government because you have a goal, that's great. That's how that's the environment. That's how we're set up in the US in many respects. But what is the goal that you want to achieve beyond your sales target? Like, what are you ultimately trying to support? And I think CivStart in this State of GovTech event, this annual event, I think this is the 6th year, tries to do a really good job of exemplifying that, like talking about startups that have a civic focus. They're bringing value back to state and local levels of government. And it's not just a talking point. Like you can see it in the product, in the delivery, and how they pitch, what is behind their sales, methodology. And I think CivStart does a great job through their accelerator program and the State of GovTech event to sort of highlight that.
What are some of the key trends, whether you're hearing today at this event or you're sitting on the board? What do you see as some of the key trends in GovTech? And I'm thinking emerging tech and its applications and adoption.
I mean, I think the obvious ones are AI, right? I mean, everyone's talking about AI. I think there's merit to that. AI is going to be around for many years, decades. But I just go back to what's the practical use and application. Yeah, I mean, like let's get a little more brass tacks into what AI is for. At the State of GovTech, one of the sessions that I just love, they have had 2 across the last 2 days, is these startup pitches.
Yeah, I like it. Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, so it's an approach that the co-founders firmly believe, where they just build exposure for startups during the State of GovTech event, and they are 3 to 4 minute pitches about their value proposition. There's a panel that asks questions, but it's an amazing opportunity for startups to just get that visibility. And it's an amazing opportunity for government leaders to hear about what startups are doing and try to make those connections. So I absolutely love this environment because I think it's very conducive. And I think what I heard over the last 2 days is that there's a lot of conversation around AI. But what I'm hearing is there's a very practical usage of AI. And so whether that's to improve the time to get a permit for someone in a local community, or to improve the way scheduling is done for executives that are inundated with hundreds and hundreds of requests. There were some really practical examples, and that's where I go. So I think it's a trend, but I think I would push the GovTech community to push and be more critical about like what practically is AI being used for. With my work in government tech for many years, when I was with the state of California, we were talking about instilling a culture of innovation within the Health and Human Services Agency. That is a very hard undertaking to change culture in government. It's a very valuable one. I'm very much a supporter of it and have been advocating for that for many years. I'm starting to see that trend come back. So when you saw the panel today with the CEO for Code for America, she's talking about culture change, right? So you're seeing leaders that I think are saying, yes, AI, new tech, right? Let's transform and automate processes, all these things that are very important to the foundation of how government operates. But something's still not working. So what do we need to do differently? And I think people are better understanding and maybe more open to, we've really got to get at the core and the foundation of how government operates, and that's through changing culture. So whether that's giving people an opportunity to elevate ideas that they have and giving them an environment to showcase them, whether it's encouraging a different way of thinking for processes that have been around for 20 years, whether that's breaking down the hierarchy within government and giving people at an analyst level an opportunity to elevate their voice in meetings, that's constructive and conducive, but also those are all tenets of like how you change culture. Mm-hmm. And how do you have leaders that embrace that so that at the end of the day, government is still delivering the services they need, but it's in a very different environment. And if you change that culture, are you going to get a different type of talent that is interested to work in government? Are you going to keep people and retain people in government because they're more enthusiastic and more, the day-to-day is more enjoyable because they're part of a different type of environment in government? And I think that it's a very foundational level of change, but it's I think in lieu of doing that, I don't think we're going to get to where we want to.
Thanks for joining me on this special edition of the Business of Government Hour, the State of GovTech 2025. My guests today have been Amanda Renteria, CEO of Code for America, and Niles Friedman, Board Chair at CivStart. Be sure to join us next time for another informative, insightful, and in-depth conversation on improving government leadership and its effectiveness. Until then, subscribe, download, and listen to the entire interview at Apple Podcast, Spotify, Audible, or on your favorite podcast app. And as always, at businessofgovernment.org.